In today's episode of Refashioned, we're discussing how fast fashion managed to hijack the Super Bowl 2026, the Bezos buying Condé Nast rumor and why it could be so bad for Vogue, the new wave of fashion influencer and why I think there are a couple of creators really changing the game and people I'm excited about. And of course, new trends happening online, things I've seen randomly on Instagram and TikTok that I want to talk about, and stuff you guys have sent me too. So as always, there's a lot to talk about. We just need to get into it. Before we do, let me say welcome back to Refashioned. If you're new here, then hi, welcome to the podcast. My name's Katie. We talk a lot about fashion and cultural trends and sustainability. If that sounds good to you, then make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening or watching this on. And kind of related, I wanted to say before we get into anything else, thank you so much to the 70,000 of you that have subscribed on YouTube. That makes such a massive difference and I'm so excited to hit that number. So thank you if you're one of those. If you're not, then subscribe. And with that, let's get into it. Okay, firstly, a custom Zara look for the Super Bowl. So Bad Bunny's halftime Super Bowl show was amazing. Don't get me wrong, absolutely loved everything about it, except the missed opportunity to champion a small brand rather than a fast fashion giant like Zara. For such an important Super Bowl too, in terms of visibility, for how much effort they put into the set design and the production of it, everything meant something, everything was so fun and happy. It just felt like a massive missed opportunity and I was kind of disappointed. Not to mention, did it feel like a massive legitimization of Zara as a fashion fixture? But we'll get into that. I honestly didn't really want to critique the show and I feel like the message it was saying was so much more important than what people were wearing on stage. But when everything in that production was so carefully thought through and when everything was put there to mean something, you have to ask what it means that he's wearing Zara. I know some people are speculating that the link comes from Bad Bunny's music being in Spanish and a big part of his fan base being Spanish, so wearing a Spanish retailer like Zara might make sense in that case. But if that was true, I don't see why he couldn't have worn a small Spanish designer instead, or maybe even a Spanish flower or just another nod that didn't involve fast fashion, especially since most of the dancers on the show were wearing Zara. I feel like that would have been enough of a nod without also doing the main look, the one that people see most of in fast fashion. And again, such a missed opportunity to champion a brand that stood for more. Like for Lady Gaga's surprise appearance, she was wearing a Dominican American designer called Raul Lopez. Within hours of the show coming on, the brand had put out an Instagram post that spoke about how important it was for their brand to be included in this celebration of their culture. And in comparison, I haven't seen any heartfelt messages from Zara's Instagram about what it meant for him to be wearing Zara, what it meant to the culture. And I honestly think this is reflected in the clothes themselves. If you compare Lady Gaga's look, which is very just gorgeous, like well designed, it says something, to Bad Bunny's, which could have been designed by any fast fashion house. There's no distinction there that really makes it a Zara look, that sets Zara apart as a high fashion brand capable of doing amazing things. And to me, that just makes it even clearer that it's just about name dropping rather than art form or rather than cultural impact. And it's just so clearly a move on Zara's part to cement themselves in the high fashion world. Designing not just one custom look, but two is just clearly paid visibility for the brand. And the fashion media has just been lapping up without any sort of reference to why Zara was picked, what their business model is, and the exploitation they rely on to create these looks. It's just really disappointing all round. And it's especially disappointing because fashion is making so many big moves for the Super Bowl. I saw this called fashion's biggest Super Bowl yet. But the contrast between this look versus the Schiaparelli one Bad Bunny wore to the Grammys is just so night and day. It's clear to me what the bigger fashion moment was, but the Super Bowl was on the biggest stage. It should have outshone it, and it just didn't, at least in my opinion. It's actually so hard to criticize because everything else about the halftime show was so perfect. And I wanted more for him, and also from him, I guess. Like the set design, the production, the singing, the guests were through the roof. But this just let it down a bit. And it kind of diluted it down to a bad collaboration with a fast fashion brand, not a big fashion moment that really cemented what he was going for with the message. At least that's my opinion. I want to hear yours. Anyway, we started with a heavy topic, but moving on to a new one, something I've noticed happening on Instagram and TikTok that is kind of not really being talked about, but I see it creeping in. Trainers are no longer cool. And I feel like, yes, it's partly the fatigue with athleisure that's been on everyone's minds for the last few years. Yes, we were obviously going to get tired of that. But also, I feel like the stronger reason is the creeping in of the arty fashion girl we've talked about already on the channel, and how this is kind of influencing the reasons why we're picking certain things in our wardrobe. Because to me, picking heels, picking loafers, picking an interesting shoe over the comfortable trainer is kind of making a statement that you're a fashion girl that cares about dressing up every day versus one that just gets dressed occasionally for TikTok or at a fancy occasion and otherwise kind of bums around. And from a wider trend point of view, it feels like we're going to be seeing less easy replicable trends like the sambas and more trends that kind of bank off inspiration, kind of bank off a feeling like wearing heels in your everyday life. And you're not necessarily going to be able to shop everyone's exact heels, but you're going to join in on that cultural movement. It's all about intentionally wearing heels or wearing an uncomfortable shoe or like an unexpected shoe for the love of the game of fashion, for the inconvenience and the messiness and the chicness of doing that versus picking the easy option of a samba. That's what I think anyway. Maybe it's actually just that everyone's got fatigued with a trainer and we're just going for anything else. Maybe I'm looking into it too much like I always do. But as always, I feel like it's a vibe shift and it's saying something deeper than that. And speaking of cultural shifts, I did a Instagram reel recently that was kind of inspired by the ones Brenda hashtag has been doing on her Instagram page. I'm going to talk about these in a little bit because I think they are important. But if you've seen them, you'll kind of get the vibe I was going for with my reel. I did trend predictions for 2026, things that I think are going to be overarching macro trends. And I wanted to discuss a fefew of them on here. Most of them I've actually already mentioned on the channel, so I'm not going to do them. But things like the actual nostalgia versus manufactured nostalgia being a status symbol is, I think, interesting. This one was inspired by a couple of captions I've seen on Instagram posts recently that have been something like the concept of actually having lived through peak Tumblr era and the idea of having actual nostalgia for something, making it cooler than if you're just being nostalgic because everyone else on the internet is being nostalgic. Like how everyone's being really nostalgic about 2016 right now. And I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe people were having a different 2016 than me. But for me to be celebrating 2016 when it wasn't a peak moment in my life would feel manufactured. And I think for a lot of people participating in the trend, it is probably more manufactured nostalgia than actual. Also, my point about the Chanel show being the start of brands changing their game from aspirational to everyday is so true. I stand by this one, I think, the most. And I just have the feeling that's going to be the vibe for 2026. We're going to have more shows, more collections, more editorials of people just existing in everyday life, but doing it with a designer handbag. We're going to have more fashion brands tying in the everyday consumer, tying in the everyday lifestyle of consumer to their editorials, to their collections, to their catwalks, because that is the only way to sell luxury right now. I think people are turned off by the idea of aspiration and they can't justify the cost of something that doesn't fit into their everyday life and feel like an essential. So brands are going to be pivoting. They're going to be doing more runway shows in public transport. I think we're not going to see the end of fashion and food anytime soon because obviously food is a necessity. Just that kind of vibe is really going to fit 2026, I think. And finally, the heated rivalry obsession. Already been proven. I posted this not too long ago, but this has already been proven by Hudson Williams walking the runway collection. And I feel like fashion is going to become so obsessed with the NHL and hockey in general, just like we've seen it become obsessed with tennis and Formula One and all of these other high money, high glamour sports. And I think we're going to see way more hockey players picking up sponsorships and sitting front row and maybe becoming ambassadors for the brand. Also, we're definitely going to see Shayna and Ilya at the Met Gala this year. That's my prediction. They're totally in. They've already got their designers ready. But going back to the Instagram real quickly, do we like these? Do we want to do more of them? Because I found them quite fun and I would kind of find it fun even if I didn't get something right. It could almost be like a summary of what we've mentioned in the podcast maybe. So let me know if you want to see more of them. Actually, speaking of things that are probably going to happen in 2026, I know this has already been a rumor for a couple of years now, but Anna Wintour and Lauren Sanchez stepping out of a taxi together has got people basically confirming that the Bezos Condé Nast merger will be happening, and the fashion community is in a meltdown. Did we see this video, by the way? Because it seems like Anna completely freezes halfway through as she realizes the optics of this. And honestly, I wasn't surprised, but I feel like it was surprising how many people were surprised and how many people very quickly jumped on the fact that this confirms Bezos is buying Condé Nast. Because as we already know, they're sponsoring the Met Gala. So this could have been a meeting just about that. And I'm sure that's what they've put in the press release, that it was just about this. But people are taking Anna's behavior and the fact that Bezos has been rumored to buy Condé Nast for a few years now as proof that this was the meeting to confirm it. Is this a big deal if Bezos does buy Condé Nast? I think it is. Vogue is an absolute pillar of the fashion community. Granted, that's kind of waned in recent years and it's kind of become a shell of what it once was and what it once stood for. And I think a lot of the importance now is actually on the smaller regional publications under the title that are actually pushing forward art direction and smaller designers. But it still has a name, it still has weight in fashion. And all of that is going to be potentially corrupted by the Bezos brand of greed and exploitation. Like if he does buy it, then how long until we see a Shein spread in Vogue? How long until we see an editorial of models wearing Amazon fashion? Tying the In the Bag series or the Get Ready With Me series to whatever is trending on Amazon Prime. I know there's already corruption and agendas in fashion and in Vogue, even though it's currently independent. But if Bezos does take it over, there's just going to be no boundaries between art forms. One man is just going to be ruling so much of the media landscape, and it's going to be so hard to have a siloed interest in something apart from the mainstream. Like, what if your favorite actor declines to work with Amazon? Are they just not going to be invited to the Met Gala? Like, obviously Vogue doesn't control fashion, and definitely fashion media has been democratized by things like TikTok and Instagram, but this would still be a big deal. And as someone who's always loved magazines, as someone who studied them at uni and did my dissertation making one and analyzing how fashion media has declined and whether it will ever resurge again, the concept of Bezos owning Condé Nast terrifies me. There's something about the physical art form of a fashion magazine that just does not click with him. It's just the complete opposite to what he stands for, it feels like. And I can totally see him abandoning the physical editions within months of acquiring and just bringing it onto a digital first Instagram, TikTok slot machine. And that will truly be the end of Condé Nast to me. So while we're on the concept of fashion sliding into hell, because we love the cheery topics here on the podcast, did we see the AI couture collection from Alexis Mobile? I mean, putting aside the fact that we can't get body diversity even when it's computer generated fantasy, the concept of a couture show generated by AI is making a mockery of the part of fashion that is objectively 100% an art form. Like, you can't argue with the fact that couture is art. And here we are corrupting it with AI for no reason. Could we not just leave one part of fashion untouched? I honestly don't know what the designer was thinking when they did this. They were clearly just thinking, can we, but not should we. And I think the backlash from the entire fashion community has kind of hopefully put any other designer off from trying this in the future. But I can see how that's only wishful thinking. I mean, did we see the fact that Topshop is planning to do the first AI catwalk soon? Clearly they're not reading the room when it comes to AI, but I will definitely be covering that runway show on my channel and digging into it and pointing out probably all the ways it's going to be bad. So not like I'm going in biased or anything, but make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you know when that video comes out, because I think it will be very, very interesting when the show takes place later on in the year. Okay, on to our first subscriber submission for the podcast. I got sent this post by Glucose Goddess and we need to talk about it. I have so many questions.
This is Glucose Goddess. I'm reporting from the Copernic studio here in Paris, and I'm wearing their revolutionary new clothing that contains hundreds of thousands of live bacteria. Inside this fabric, Copernic have done something incredible. They've built tiny microscopic houses for healthy bacteria to live in, and they've added one specific strain of healthy bacteria called B. subtilis. And as I wear it, B. subtilis and the food from my microbiome are moving from the fabric to my skin. Basically, this piece of clothing is actively modulating my skin microbiome. You can see here the amount of bacteria on the skin before wearing the top and after wearing the top for 8 hours. And you can see the presence of B. subtilis doubles in that time.
So they're calling this new technology collection, I'm not even sure, care wear. And people are not having it online. Like this gives me hope in humanity, the amount of people that are just calling this out straight away. Like I said, I have questions. First off, is this even a real thing? Like, does this actually do what they're saying it will do? Secondly, why is it made of polyester and elastane? Like, we're trying to save our bodies but kill the planet, and also not really even save our bodies because polyester has been proven to have so many negative health effects. And it feels like for the majority of the internet, we're slowly turning away from polyester for this reason. And a lot of us are moving towards natural instead. So bringing out a new collection focused on health but made out of polyester feels very tone deaf. And thirdly, not a criticism, but like a note about the collection itself. Do we think this ties into what Inyana was saying in her trend prediction videos about how our clothing is going to slowly start being designed to change for our environments? Like how Earth is getting more polluted, so our clothing is going to be the barrier between the pollution and ourselves, and it's going to help regulate us and keep us healthy even as we continue killing the planet. I don't know, there's something about this collection that just feels very tone deaf. You're part of the system that is actively making our planet worse, and yet you're trying to put a band-aid on that by getting between us and the earth rather than trying to fix the earth. It doesn't make sense in my mind. It's just another one of fashion's hypocrisies, and I'm not even sure it's genuine technology that can exist. I'd like to see someone who's genuinely wearing it in their everyday life and whether it has had a difference. I actually can't wait to see the comments on that one because I feel like so many of you are going to absolutely hate that collection. So please send me your thoughts. They make me laugh. Anyway, moving on to the next thing. I was on Instagram, as I so often am, and I saw the Lyas live photo shoot he did for his interview with Dazed. Did we catch this? I thought this was so fun. Basically, if you didn't, then Lyas was doing his photo shoot for a spread in Dazed, and he decided to do it live and invite people in his community to come down and help vote on what outfit he wore for the collection, to be there to see behind the scenes of the photo shoot. I just thought it was so good. Like, I know I've gone on and on about how gatekeeping is coming back into fashion, but I feel like education is creeping in, and like this accessibility is also paradoxically creeping in. And Lyas is at the forefront of this. Like, no one is doing access like him into fashion right now. The fact that he could invite his community to come down and be a part of this photo shoot, like actually get in the magazine, vote on what he's wearing, that's true power. That's the power of community that brands want to mimic, but they just don't put enough effort into. I just, again, don't think anyone's doing it like Lyas is. And I mean, speaking of people also changing the industry, I mentioned Brenda hashtag earlier, and I want to speak about her again because I get a lot of comments from people asking like, how do I keep up with industry news? Who are the best influencers to follow? And I've answered that a little bit on Patreon, where I get my sources, who I like to follow. And that video is free if you want to go watch that. But I think Brenda hashtag and her brain dumps are one of the best resources happening in fashion right now. If you want to get an idea about what's happening, just like have your finger on the pulse a little bit about maybe more obscure things that you don't see happening in the major media publications, or like an inside scoop into the influencer economy. I think everything she's writing about is kind of shining a spotlight on the important things. And there are a couple of things in a recent post from her that I wanted to pull up. Like her comment about how in an AI world, we'll be starting to signal imperfection in designs and campaigns. This is so true. I've already started seeing this, the kind of like messy aesthetic. We're going to start seeing brands lean into the imperfect. And I feel like this post in itself is an example of leaning into the imperfect. There's so many half-finished sentences here that really just convey the mood and the feeling rather than a perfectly formed thought. Like one of these sentences just being, how many Substacks are you willing to pay for? Like that resonates with me because I feel like Substack is getting overcrowded and there's so many subscriptions you could pay for, and that would really add up. And like these people are all doing great things, but it's so expensive, and it's maybe going to start pushing people back to one publication model like Vogue, because you know it's a £9.99 subscription for a month versus individual subscriptions from Substack that are all $3.99, and you know you end up paying like £120. It's very finger on the pulse, it's very real, it's very like authentic. This is actually someone's brain dump happening on their Notes app, and we've spoken about the Notes app aesthetic and how it feels like you're closer to the influencer. I can just see how this becomes the new normal, and I've kind of already like emulated it with my Instagram reel. I just think this is fun. Also, the fact that on here she says, who's styling Bad Bunny for the Super Bowl? I've got bad news. Like this happened, she did this post in January. We didn't know what was going to happen. She's done a couple of other posts like this. I hope she continues to do them. But in one of these other posts, she said some interesting thoughts on the future of fashion. And again, this just feels like good insight into what's happening both from inside and outside the fashion industry. The part about asking for no more influencer gifting because it's clearly not the stuff she actually needs, that is interesting. And I've heard from a lot of people in the industry that this is a building problem that's been happening for years, and influencers are getting pretty tired of it. And also the other part of this where it says brands are going to be turning from shopping influencers to influencers who have built an empire. That I think is so on the pulse of what's happening. And to be honest, Brenda feels like one of these influencers that have built an empire. So does Lyas. I think they are like next gen influencers, and that's why I consume a lot of their content, because it feels like they're bringing fresh air to the fashion industry that's felt so stale, that's kind of regressed into itself because of all these outside influences that have meant, you know, no one's buying right now. They're all panicking. They don't know what to do with the fashion industry. They've gone back to what they know works, but it no longer works. Like basically the whole fashion model has been thrown out and everything is changing. Lyas and Brenda feel like they're emerging from the rubble, if that makes sense. It makes me feel hopeful because to me, these influencers represent education and accessibility over shopping hauls and sponsored posts. Anyway, I've waffled enough about Brenda. We need to move on. We need to talk about some of those sponsored posts. And actually, speaking of bad news, we're not quite in that new era yet because there have been a couple of PR campaigns that I've noticed creeping into 2026 already. I think we need to talk about the Puma speedcat wedges as like a main one. It was kind of the first example I saw of a manufactured trend rollout in 2026. And especially amongst the new cool breed of influencer that I've spoken about on the channel, this new cool girl who doesn't necessarily do a lot of campaigns, who doesn't necessarily try sell you much. I saw a lot of them getting Puma speedcat wedges. And I don't like it. I don't think this campaign is working. Maybe I'm not the intended audience because I'm never going to buy this. But it felt weird to see a lot of the girls that I thought were above this come down to sell them. Is that too mean? I don't know. But then also Phoebe, my girl, did mention in her 2026 predictions that she thought wedges were going to be big this year. So maybe this is just like ahead of the trend and we're all going to be wearing Puma speedcats later on in the year. I don't think I will. I don't like them. But maybe TikTok will mass adopt them. And I just think it's funny. I don't know, maybe because I was so focused on the like new it girl and how she might not be able to be sold. And then I immediately saw this happening and was like, oh no, influencer marketing is still influencer marketing. I don't know. I just think there was something weird about this whole campaign. Like, does it make you want to buy these ugly shoes? It's not working for me, but maybe that's just me. I need to know if this is just a me thing. Okay, so next, it feels like it wouldn't be a refashion episode at this point without mentioning cigarettes at least once. But I have good news here, and that is that the internet is already flipping back on its stance on cigarettes. And to be fair, I don't know if this is just maybe influenced by like the whimsy drive on social media that I've seen so much of, and how people just want whimsy. We crave the funny and the unserious in the serious times. But saying that eating an apple on the sidewalk is more cool than smoking a cigarette is messaging I can get behind. I love it. And people love it. So like, this is good news. This is the end of the cigarette propaganda that we've been speaking about so much, and I'm so here for it. To be honest, this whole episode is feeling very brain dumpy. I'm sort of just flip-flopping back and forth over random things that I've had in my notes for ages, because I haven't done a podcast episode for ages. This is the first one of 2026. I thought I was going to do one in January, but then January was just like god awful. So here we are. This is all old and new stuff dating back 2 months that I wanted to talk to you guys about. So I apologize for the chaos. But now we are going to talk about, I've been seeing utility belts everywhere. And I think it's so fun. I think it's so on the nose about how fashion is getting more utilitarian. But also I think they're fun styling tools and I kind of want one. Is this performative or not? It feels very like hobby core coded, but I actually love the practicality of it. I don't know. Do we think the average everyday consumer is going to be wearing a belt and carrying around stuff like they're a carpenter, except the stuff they're carrying around is like lip gloss and their phone and wired headphones? I mean, this is the kind of fashion trend that I actually think is really fun because it is kind of like playing dress up, but making it fashion girly coded. Okay, speaking of utilitarian fashion coming back, and this might be a bit of a reach, but I want to potentially explore a new topic for a video essay and I want to hear your guys' thoughts. I have seen a lot of people talking about how fashion is getting more political in 2026, and I'm not sure I entirely agree, and I want to hear your thoughts on whether you agree. I think there's definitely been a lot of moves for brands trying to look like they're getting more political, but actually making moves to fund or to support campaigns that will make a difference, no. Right? Like, no, I haven't heard of many, if any, big fashion brands doing that. And yet Vogue has put out an article asking if fashion is getting more political again. And it feels like a misrepresentation of what fashion is doing. I think it could be an interesting video. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on it before I start scripting it, before I put it out there. So like, send me in your thoughts. But I think it feels performative, like much of what fashion does to try and make a statement. But finally, I thought we'd start ending these podcast episodes by doing little recommendations, because I'm always looking for new things to watch and read and listen to, and I thought if I volunteered mine, you guys might volunteer yours. So I'll go through what I'm currently looking at. So the book I'm currently reading is Colony by Annika Norlin. I've been really enjoying this read. It's all about the reasons why we might want to disconnect from society, and also the kind of danger of cults and cult behavior. And I just think it's really pertinent for 2026. It feels very relevant, and yeah, it's been gripping. I haven't much put it down. I'm almost through. Ignore my giant bookmark, but I am almost through it. So that's a good reading recommendation. In terms of music, I've been listening to Francis Whitney. I'm eagerly awaiting Noah Kahan's new album. Like, I will be getting tickets to his tour if he chooses to tour this new album, because I didn't get to see Stick Season and I'm gutted. And in terms of watching, I've watched all that's out for season 4 of Bridgerton, and my fiance and I are starting Industry. We're on season 2, but I've heard season 4 gets really good. So, and I've been enjoying it so far. So that's what we're currently watching. So yeah, if you're looking for recommendations, those are mine. And please give me yours in return, especially for TV shows and movies. And actually, speaking of, I need to decide if I'm going to see Wuthering Heights or not. I don't know if I can bring myself to do it, but I also think I would be annoyed if I missed out. I don't know. Are we going to see it? Even ironically, I feel like it could be fun. Maybe I'll do a poll that asks you guys to decide if I go or not, and then I'll just honor the results of that poll on Instagram. Yeah, maybe we'll do that. So look out for that poll and maybe go force me to watch a bad film. But yeah, with that, I think we'll end this podcast there. Thank you so much for watching. It's nice to get back into the refashion episodes, so they should be coming more frequently. If you enjoyed this, as always, then make sure you're subscribed, following wherever you're watching or listening to this on. And thank you so much for being here. I'll speak to you guys so soon, and I hope you have a lovely day. Bye.